everyone and welcome to LewisFiction, and in today's video we're going to be covering what if the Amazing Spider-Man cinematic universe actually succeeded and continued. What would the universe have looked like based on the information from the Sony email leaks, interviews and scrapped plans? Well, in today's video, we are going to be exploring that idea, and trust me, there are some wild ideas in here, which, if they actually made it to the big screen, would have either been ungodly awful or just flat out hilarious. But either way, if the universe actually succeeded in its development based off the information available to us and some fan interpretation by myself to fill in some of the gaps, here is what I think that universe would have looked like. So The Amazing Spider-Man 2 has just been released in 2014, and despite poor reception, the deal with Marvel is never made to include Tom Holland in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and the Amazing Universe continues. In late 2016, the next film in the universe is released, initially slated for 2018 and now bumped up to 2016 while Sony continues to develop the next Spider-Man film, is the Sinister Six as it releases in theaters. Written and directed by the beloved Drew Goddard, this film, from what we know would have been very similar to something like James Gunn's Suicide Squad. This film wouldn't take itself too seriously and would play off a very wacky team dynamic of supervillains. This movie would include previous villains in the TASM franchise like Electro and the Lizard. However, the main characters of this film would also be none other than Dr. Otto Octavius and Flint Marko. Spider-Man would also appear in this film, although not as the main character. He would end up teaming up with the Sinister Six as a bigger threat causes them to band together for the greater good. This film ends up tackling the theme of heroism and redemption, especially for our main two characters, Ock and Sandman. After all is said and done, Spider-Man hopes the villains can go on to become heroes, but instead they turn on the webhead, signaling the tragic nature of what it means to become a supervillain. Spider-Man faces off against the Six, rounding out the film there. Moving on to late 2017, we have the Silver Sable and Black Cat spin-off movie, titled Silver and Black. However, this film isn't as simple nor as grounded as it first initially seems. Most people will remember this movie for just being a grounded Silver Sable and Black Cat spin-off movie, but some of the original plans for this film that were proposed by Sony were absolutely wild. And this is at the point in the universe where things start to get a bit crazy. Otto Octavius returns in this film as the main antagonist. It's revealed that his wife has died in between the events of the last film and this one, and Otto needs to find a way to get her back, which is when he turns to the multiverse. You know, like anyone else would. He tries to open the multiverse to find another version of his wife in another universe, creating some wacky technology. Silver Sable, who is the main hero of this film, creates her own team to try and stop Otto Octavius, including Felicity Jones's Black Cat from The Amazing Spider-Man 2. However, the team doesn't just stop there, as multiple versions of Spider-Woman would actually turn from the multiverse to be involved in this team as well. One of these Spider-Women would actually turn out to be an alternate version of Gwen Stacy, bringing back Emma Stone to the role. However, this version of Gwen Stacy Spider-Woman would not be Spider-Gwen, as during this film's development, Spider-Gwen didn't actually exist yet. The actual Spider-Gwen that we all know and love from the Spider-Verse films and the Spider-Verse comics was actually created in late 2014 by Dan Slott, in which this film would have already been well into development. This movie essentially would just be Sony's way of doing an A-Force movie using the Spider-Man mythos. We finally make it to the summer of 2018 and The Amazing Spider-Man 3, but the crazy ideas don't stop at Silver and Black, as it was very likely that the symbiote would have appeared in this film. This movie would also introduce Mary Jane Watson, played by Shailene Woodley, who was cut from a few scenes in The Amazing Spider-Man 2. However, she's brought back on board for this film to introduce a brand new love interest for Peter Parker in the wake of Gwen Stacy's death. However, that doesn't mean that Gwen Stacy isn't going to be appearing in this film, as this film would also follow Peter Parker as he tries to bring back Captain Stacy and Gwen Stacy from the dead, using a new synthetic formula based off his father's research. This would then lead to the creation of the symbiote. Gwen is successfully cloned, bringing Emma Stone back to the role once again. However, Gwen would end up becoming Carnage, which then leads us on to the next film in the universe, which is Venom. Although in modern day this film ended up being entirely different from its original plans, Venom actually ended up making it to theaters. But before it was a standalone project away from the TASM-Verse, Venom possibly would have followed up on this Carnage story, with Eddie Brock as Venom being the one to face off against Gwen Stacy's Carnage in late 2018. The symbiote saga would eventually come to a close, and this would then lead us on to the next film in the universe, which is The Amazing Spider-Man 4, which would release in summer of 2019 with a brand new frontier. This film, interestingly, would actually be a prequel to The Amazing Spider-Man 2, which was set out to be a film that filled in the gaps in between The Amazing Spider-Man 1 and The Amazing Spider-Man 2. The film would follow Norman Osborn, who was still alive, but dying, wanting Spider-Man's blood to try and create a cure for himself, as he has the Osborn disease. This would be the same disease that Norman talks to Harry about in The Amazing Spider-Man 2. He would then hire Kraven the Hunter, who would successfully fight and bring in Spider-Man so Norman could take his blood. Spider-Man during this time would still be inexperienced, which is why he ends up losing to Kraven. I also imagine this film could also explore the idea of how Peter gets his brand new suit from The Amazing Spider-Man 2, leaving a little bit of a crossover in between the two films. Once Kraven brought Spider-Man in, Norman would create a cure using Spider-Man's blood and would use it on himself, turning himself into the giant monster goblin from the Ultimate Spider-Man comics. Peter would end up facing off against Monster Goblin, and after coming out victorious, this would then lead us to the frail and weakened Norman Osborn that we meet in The Amazing Spider-Man 2. This would connect the events from TASM 1 and TASM 2 very nicely. This would also explain why Peter refused to give Harry his blood in TASM 2, as Norman Osborn already did the same thing, which turned him into a monster. This explains why Peter would know the ramifications of this if he was to give Harry his blood in The Amazing Spider-Man 2, which ultimately adds a lot more depth to their relationship. Gwen would also appear in this film as well, expanding upon their on and off relationship that they had during the events of TASM 1 and TASM 2. Damn, Emma Stone just can't catch a break. She's in, like, all of these movies. However, one movie that she actually wouldn't be in would be coming out in late 2019, where an Aunt May spy film would have been released. Not much is known about this film other than its proposal by Sony Pictures, but if it were to happen, I imagine this film would follow May Parker and would be a prequel to TASM 1. I imagine this film would also bring Martin Sheen back to play Uncle Ben. I imagine this film would also include Richard and Mary Parker and would follow them on the lead up to them leaving Peter. I imagine this film would also expand a lot on Oscorp Industries, Norman Osborn, Dr. Curtis Connors, and that whole sort of area of the TASM-Verse. This then leads us onto the grand finale of the TASM-Verse, The Amazing Spider-Man 5, releasing in the summer of 2020. Using The Amazing Spider-Man 4 as a precursor, Norman Osborn would return in dramatic fashion, and in a turn of events, this film would be the grand finale to Sony's Spider-Man franchise, as none other than Tobey Maguire would make an appearance for a Spider-Verse team-up movie. The multiverse had already been explored in the Silver and Black movie, and it returns here to pair up Tobey and Andrew's Spider-Men. At first, they face off against each other, until it's revealed that it was an elaborate plan by Norman Osborn to get back at Peter Parker, so therefore they team up and end up taking him down. I imagine this film would also probably include the Spider-Women variants that we saw in the Silver and Black movie, possibly even including Venom, Silver Sable, and Black Cat themselves. This would mean probably that Spider-Gwen would also make an appearance in this film, bringing Emma Stone back once again. If this universe actually went ahead, she'd be playing Gwen Stacy for a very long time by the looks of things. But either way, that rounds out the Amazing Spider-Man universe, and what if the cinematic universe that Sony was building, based off their ideas that were proposed in the leaks, the emails, interviews, and everything like that, this is how it would have turned out. It is crazy. A lot of these ideas probably wouldn't have made it through if the universe actually continued, but then again, based off what they were setting up in The Amazing Spider-Man 2, with the films that were actually actively in development and close to shooting, I would not be surprised if this is how it ended up. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to leave a like, make sure to subscribe for more fanfictions, more what-if scenarios in the comment section down below. Also, make sure to suggest future video ideas that you want me to cover. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Take care and peace.